what are you doing?
You're welcome.
Trying to get me in trouble with Mr.
Hey, you were
Mr.
typing
Super Heavyweight Champ.
You were sending me great stuff. I figured it would be worth it.
I send jokes that I don't necessarily want to say.
It seemed like you wanted to go there.
Nope. But I went there.
You did.
I went there. And I do think it was funny. But I don't think he did. Hey! Welcome back, everybody.
To the Reverend and the Reprobate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
with an actual reverend and the fun one.
So today we get the opportunity to talk to a good friend of ours, but also a very accomplished professional MMA fighter, Ron Waterman. You can check him out at ronwaterman.com. He talks about some of that stuff in there. We talk a little bit about his book, Tapped Out by Jesus, From the Cage to the Cross, which is a compilation of stories throughout his life, his career with the WWE, which back then was the WWF.
WWE, WEC.
Yeah, WEC. Right? Pancrase.
And UFC, Pancrase, where they fight insulin.
Yeah. I don't think that's
all they got to do there is not have sugar or white flour.
Yeah,
according to Leanne Morgan.
So Ron talks to us a little bit about that. He talks to us about godly manhood. Talks about, which I thought was really great. He gets into in the book about what his struggle was like moving through divorce as a Christian. It's not something that he wanted or. But it is eventually what happened with his first marriage. Now he's been married to a great gal named Daisy now, and they've got a little girl, and he's just experiencing happiness on a whole new level and what that journey was like. He gives some advice on how to get through that for some of the men that we know, some of the guys that we're actually really close to that are walking through this same thing. So just a great, really cool, really transparent, very authentic interview with Ron. It will be a little disjointed not because of Ron, but because we're hopping around all over the place. There's just so much stuff to talk about, and so we got excited.
Yeah, you get into some real deep discussion with him, and he does not think I'm very funny. That sums up the interview.
Well, we will let people judge that for themselves, so
check it out.
Buckle up.
And also, it's been a little bit, but pray for Kyle. Bathroom issues.
Yeah.
Still having bathroom issues.
Reprobate, we're honored today to have one of our friends from Team Impact as we bring things full circle around to some of the interviews we did at the very beginning. But we waited on this one because as much as I love Randall and Greg...
I'm scared of this one.
We needed some practice before we did this because this guy has been professionally interviewed before. And we are less worse at interviews, as we have said, than we were in the beginning. We've got with us Ron H2O Waterman. So Ron was a fighter in the UFC in the early 2000s, and WEC, and Pride, and Pancrase. 14 years with Team Impact, which is where I was first exposed to Ron in the way that there was this ginormous man who just like patted me on the head and was like, "You look like one of the Hanson brothers." I was like, "Oh, thank you very much. No, please don't eat me." And then, since then has become a paramedic. He's authored a book called Tapped Out by Jesus, which I own and highly recommend. You can get it on Amazon or through his website, ronwaterman.com. And has another a children's book where they're shopping for a publisher. So if you are a publisher and need an awesome children's book, I'm sure Ron's got one, or at the very least you can hear his pitch. But without further ado, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend, the H2O man himself.
What's going on, Ron?
Ron Waterman.
Not much, brother. Just glad to be here.
Yeah. I actually first, so I was at Team Impact similar, probably around the time that I'm sure we would have crossed paths at some point, but the time that I remember meeting you was at a UFC fight, and it was very fast. And I don't think you were fighting that night, but Shane was the guy you were training.
Okay.
The Texas Showdown.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It was that one.
And there was an accident that happened at that fight where a man lost a bit of himself that no one ever once crushed and lost. Mm-hmm. And I remember that there was a long delay in the fights before that, and we were trying to figure it out, and somebody came up and they're like, "This is going to take a while."
I was debating on becoming a UFC fighter, and that was the night that I decided it wasn't for me.
Oh, really? Wow. I never knew that about you
complete
before.
lie. That's a complete lie.
Yeah. So, Ron, talk us through your career path, because I don't know, and this is an unfair stereotype that a lot of athletes get. I know you were a collegiate athlete, and obviously you were a professional athlete. But one of the stereotypes that a lot of athletes get is that they are sort of these like grunts. So how do you go from athlete, because you were an amateur and professional athlete, you were also an art teacher and an author. How did that career path work? How did you get from point A to point B?
Well, I was a college wrestler, so that was kind of an easy transition to UFC fighter from there, because I was as a coach, my wrestling team, obviously they're like, hey, we've got a challenge for you. There's this cool sport that was just coming into the mainstream at the time. And it was just kind of one of those sports that was kind of taboo on television. And they dared me to enter this local competition that was down in Denver, about an hour drive away, coming up, and they said, we dare you to enter this competition. And there was 3 fights in one night. So I took them up on the challenge. I trained for like literally a month, drove down to Denver and had 3 fights in one night. I ended up fighting 2 of the guys that were previously in the UFC, and won 3 fights in one night. Each of them lasted like 30 seconds. And come to find out, it was called the Boss Rutan Invitational.
Oh, nice.
And to find out, John Peretti is the official of this, and he's the UFC matchmaker. So lo and behold, I get a invitation right to the next UFC. So I had 3 amateur fights, and I get invited right to the next UFC.
Wow.
My career just kind of springboards right into the UFC. My first UFC fight lasted 20 seconds. I tapped the guy out by strikes. So my MMA career it just explodes, gets launched right up. And then I find myself getting flown out to California to get put in the first UFC video game. And on the way out to...
Which I own, by the way.
What console was that on?
It was on PlayStation.
Oh, the original one.
Yeah, it's on the original PlayStation. I don't have the PlayStation, but I still have the UFC fight game. Yeah, so that I could play as Ron.
What were your stats? I'm sure you don't know that one. I wouldn't.
I thought it was tech at the time. It's so cool because I'm thinking, oh man, this is so high tech. And then I played it like probably 6 months ago, and oh my gosh, compared to today, it's like
it's so hard to play.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, I recently started playing the Nintendo 64 again, GoldenEye, Rogue Squadron, some of those old ones, and I was like, this sucks. This is not what I remembered. But I did want to ask you. You mentioned that it was a taboo sport. I remember. I mean, I don't know that I was aware of it when it really first came out, but when at least I became aware of it, there was, growing up in church, there was a lot of, I would say it was taboo. I think you nailed it on the head with that. Why do you think it was so taboo? Being a sport that's controlled, similar to boxing?
Well, back then, I mean, they were calling it, human cockfighting, and McCain was, trying to get it outlawed from television. And, it was just one of those things that people didn't understand. They didn't consider it a real sport, and it was just a bloodbath. And I knew right away, clear back then, I knew that this sport was going to explode one day.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And sure enough, now, because I saw the competitive edge of it, and sure enough, now it's sanctioned, and it's become one of the biggest sports in mainstream, of course. But anyway, to continue my story, I was on the airplane flying out to get this videotape taken, and I sit next to this guy, and he starts asking me all these questions, and lo and behold, he's best friends with Shane McMahon, and he starts talking to me and telling me how I should be this professional wrestler. And he sets me up with an interview with Shane McMahon. So I get flown out to WWE headquarters the following week in Stamford, Connecticut, with Shane McMahon, Jim Ross, and all these big wigs of WWE. And I end up signing a 4-year contract with the WWE, and giving up fighting for a couple of years and traveling the world with the World Wrestling Federation at the time.
Good grief.
World Wrestling Entertainment, become tag team partners with Brock Lesnar, and I'm traveling the world with Batista and Cena and all these guys that you watch on television today. And so that was another chapter of my life that I got to experience for a couple of years. And when that chapter closed, that's when I kind of got tied up with Team Impact, because one of the guys that I used to wrestle with was a former Power Team member, Rico Constantino.
Okay.
And that you don't want to go with the Power Team. He goes, you got to travel with these guys called Team Impact. So he gave me the number of Jeff Otis. I send Jeff Otis an email, and he calls me on the phone 30 minutes later, and flies me out to California, or flies me out to Texas, and puts me on a crusade with Jeff Neal and Guy Earl and a couple of others, and I've been with the team ever since.
That's awesome. Jeff Neal, the Man of Steel.
Yeah, I remember when we were in the office, the version of the story that we got was that Jeff Otis discovered you. And then when somebody was like, no, Ron emailed Jeff. And Jeff was like, well, yeah, but I called him back. We're like, high five. High five. High five. You got cold emailed by one of the greatest athletes in the world at the time. And so, well done on calling him back. It was a way to scope the talent.
Good call, buddy.
Yeah. So what was it like being on the road with those guys in the WWF, which is now, like you said, it's the WWE. What was that road lifestyle like? And especially, you were a believer at the time that you were on the road with them, or not?
Lucas, I was a brand new believer.
Yeah. So what was that like?
And I thought I was going to go in there and just change the world.
Right.
Being this brand new believer, I thought I was going to go in there and start holding Bible studies with these guys and just totally change all of this. And man, I was so awakened, just kind of overwhelmed by the whole thing. And it was rough. It was actually really hard, trying to survive in that world and trying to excel and move up, and being surrounded by, I guess not a better word for it, is being surrounded by demons.
Yeah.
and that environment, and trying to survive in there and trying to excel and still battle everything that's around you. And I lasted for 2 years, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And had to get out.
You talk a lot in your book about how your first few weeks on the road with Team Impact were really life-changing in the fact of the perspective that it brought on what true manhood was and how to take care of your family and those kind of things. One of the things that we've really noticed as we've done this podcast is that there is this huge gap in male community, and I think a lot of guys are in that same boat that you were in when you were with the WWE and WWF, as far as that they want to be able to do things as a believer, but it's so hard when the world is pressing against you. What would you say to guys that are in that boat to encourage them, what are things that they can do to begin the pursuit of godly manhood, of being a godly husband, a godly father, and just for the single guys like what I was just a few months ago, to be a godly man in the midst of a world that's constantly like putting things against you or pressing on you to make changes that are in the opposite direction?
Yeah, just having that accountability and being surrounded by other Christian, strong Christian role models was huge for me. So when I got with Team Impact, instead of being surrounded by all these worldly guys that are all about egos and themselves and what I called God glory and girls, now I'm surrounded by these guys that are all about Jesus and living for Christ. And, they're all about their families, and they're praying over me, and they're praying over their families, and that God comes first in their lives. And man, I was just floored, to room with these guys that are, on the phone. They're praying for their wives over their phone every single night. And they don't room by themselves. They room with another guy, just hold each other accountable. And it was just a different world for me. And to enter into this other world, I was like, man, this is amazing. And I was so unlike what I was used to, that I was like, this is what I was called to do.
And as a part of Team Impact, Danley and I got to go several years on the road with them over the course of time, and getting to see your ministry and your interaction with people. The one thing that I always remember was that there were a handful of the athletes, not that all the guys on Team Impact weren't incredible athletes in their own regard, but that there were a handful of athletes that allowed the feet ministry to maintain legitimacy. Randall was one, because Randall was constantly competing as a power lifter, and so that there were guys that were in competition that were part of it. Josh Thigpen was another, as he did the World Strongman competitions, and you were one. And your area of athletics, being in fighting, was always one that for a lot of people there was a big question mark, that they were like, okay, so he's a fighter, and he's a Christian, and he's a minister. How do those things, mesh together? Yeah, how does that work? So what was it, for you? Was there ever any difficulty reconciling those things together, or did you always feel like it was a pretty clear thing that was offered to you, or opportunities you had in front of you?
I thought it was always super clear for me, and I've said this from day one, is God needs people in every single one of those fields. He needs witnesses in every one of those. And God used me in that field all the time. I mean, as a witness. So when I was on the road, as a fighter, I mean, I got to witness to people all around me. After I got through with a fight in Pride, I got to stand in front of millions of people and quote scripture in the middle of the ring. And I have to point my finger up to the sky and thank the Lord for the opportunity that he gave me, and not point my finger at myself like you see so many athletes do today. And, I got to be a witness for him in front of millions of people. And, that's what God's using me for. It wasn't about me. It was about him. So, and be a good sportsman, go out there and hug your opponent, and, give thanks to the Lord for the opportunities that he's given you. So, God needs witnesses in every single sport. It doesn't matter what it is. And it wasn't about the violence of the sport. It was about the competition of the sport. And I'm a competitor, and I still am today. And I love the competition aspect of the sport. It's not about me going out and hurting my opponent. It's never been about that for me. It's competition, and I love competition. I still do, and I always will. But that's not what I'm in it for. It's not about violence.
So you have accomplished one of what I consider one of the greatest feats in martial arts, and that is becoming a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is the practice of jiu-jitsu, and the just sort of longevity and commitment that it takes to become a black belt in jiu-jitsu is incredible. It's not something we had an instructor who became a black belt. He was one of our professors at a jiu-jitsu school I was at. He became a black belt in Taekwondo in 7 months. It took him 12 years to get his black belt in jiu-jitsu. What was that journey like for you, and why was jiu-jitsu so appealing to you in particular?
Well, I was a college wrestler, so that was kind of the easiest transition for me to be a ground fighter. It was kind of all the things you couldn't do as a wrestler, you could do as a jiu-jitsu artist. So that was the one martial art that was the easiest to transition into for me. So jiu-jitsu was, the one passion that I had that was easy to transition into. I'm not a great stand-up guy, never have been. And I entered the game back when you could be just a good wrestler, actually, and still be a champion.
Yeah.
You didn't have to be so well-rounded like you have to today to be a great fighter.
So typically in MMA there are strikers and then ground fighters. Is that correct? So what is
Correct.
You mentioned going from wrestling to jiu-jitsu being a natural path, and that you can expand upon your wrestling skills. What are things you can do in jiu-jitsu that you can't do in wrestling?
Chokes and all kinds of heel hooks and locks and stuff, but mainly chokes and a lot of bars and stuff that you can lock up, and submissions that you can't do in wrestling.
So if I remember from the times that we got to roll with you whenever we were on the road, I remember there was one thing that you had said to me Ron once called me wiry, and yeah, you were like, no, you're wiry, and I never could figure out whether or not it was a compliment. It was like, because I think I was like 140 pounds at the time, and somebody was like, yeah, Ron said you're pretty wiry, and I was like, yeah, is that good, or is he just saying that I'm small, and that's like the compliment you give small guys? No. So it was good, but there was one move that I always ended up in no matter what, and it was the key lock.
Yes.
Which seemed to be your go-to. What were, if you were to narrow it down, like these are my favorite 2 or 3 submissions, your go-tos, what were those?
Well, definitely a key lock. If you look back at my record, you'll see that not most, but a good majority of my wins came from a key lock because I was a wrestler. So getting into side mount and then you start ground and pounding somebody, the first thing that they do is they come up to defend themselves and block those punches from side mount, and they just feed that arm right up to block themselves, and they feed right up into a key lock. So that was a super easy submission for me. So a key lock is probably my number one, and then a arm triangle is another one that is a good one for me.
And those,
just because of wrestling.
All of these things I've heard Joe Rogan say.
Yeah.
I remember when we were rolling the first time that I went up to do that and got put into a key lock.
You love saying that, don't you?
It was because Ron was like slow motion, like punching at us. I was totally pinned down. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and he's like, "And this is what I would be doing with my fist right now." I'm like, "This is not." My skull would just be crushed. It would just be completely gone. You talk some in your book about your marriage late in life, that you've got a daughter now after having raised 2 boys, and you've got grandkids. What is life now looking back as a dad of, and your daughter is how old?
7. 7 years old, just this last week.
Okay, so how old are the grandkids?
Grandkids are 2, 3, and 5.
Okay, so what is it like being dad and granddad at the same time?
It's pretty crazy. I'm just glad that I had mine before I was a grandparent.
Do you?
That would have been super weird.
Yeah.
Do you spoil your grandkids and tell your daughter no at the same time? Like you 3 get ice cream, you don't get any. You got to do your homework.
Mine gets spoiled pretty bad, though.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
What have you found? I guess so you're, to let our audience know, now you are a firefighter and paramedic.
I am.
What has been which obviously that means you're staying in good shape. You look way younger than Danley and I do, though our audience might not know that you are slightly older than us.
Yeah. What's next on your manly job agenda?
Yeah. Well, what's it been like for you during the pandemic? What adjustments have you had to make? Because we haven't had a first responder on the show since this started. So I'm curious as to what are the adjustments that you've had to make as a first responder, and what has life been like since the pandemic started for you?
You know, it really, my job hasn't changed a whole lot. We, obviously still have to go to work as a firefighter and a paramedic.
Right.
We still work we work 48-hour shifts. So we go and work 2 days and then we get 4 days off. Our work is pretty much the same. We haven't, it's changed a little bit in that we run our calls a little bit differently. We have to dress differently at work, and we wear full COVID restrictions when we're running calls now. We have to dress differently and wear our full PPE and masks and respond differently to our patients and stuff. But other than that, I mean, our calls are all the same. It's all kind of just been a crazy world. 2020 was definitely a crazy year for us.
Yeah, and
Agreed.
Now you're in the Greeley, Colorado area, and isn't that where the retirement home protest was, where the people in the retirement home came out and said we would rather die of COVID than loneliness a few months ago?
They might have been Greeley. I'm in Windsor now, and we're actually building a house in Berthoud. But
oh, nice.
Yeah, Greeley has a lot of retirement homes, so I would not doubt that happened.
So what is, I guess, transitioning to back to training and things, are you still training in jiu-jitsu, and has COVID affected the way that you're able to train?
It's actually affected us quite a bit. I was supposed to go to several classes, and actually for my department, we were going to instruct a class for all of our employees at Mountain View at my fire department, and just a self-defense class for all of the people. And we had to cancel that 3 times now because of COVID, because we can't have that many people in a room. We couldn't even have 3 people.
Oh, good grief.
And you can't roll now in a room because you have to be masked up. And obviously jiu-jitsu and wearing masks isn't a real good combination. And
no,
people sweating on each other is not real great with COVID right now. So it's affected jiu-jitsu and rolling quite a bit.
Wow.
I wonder how this affects the UFC. I mean, I'm assuming that they are getting...
There's nobody in the stands if you've seen any of the fights that have happened.
Yeah, which is really bizarre.
Strange,
but the training that they have to go through, they have to roll with partners. And I mean, I'm assuming that every day they're getting COVID tested and...
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah, and the camps would be strange. I mean, I'm sure you just have a few people in your camp, and those people have to be pretty good friends and stay pretty isolated, I would assume, and not go out and party. I mean, they probably got to be pretty much isolated, just that group of people for your own camp.
So looking back, you've had a big career that spanned a lot of different stuff, and we've covered a lot of that ground. We've talked about the stuff that's in the book. You've got the children's book, which is I'm assuming loosely based off of your kids program that you did for the elementary schools, where you were made fun of as a child for being chubby, and now you outweigh us by 100 pounds, but you have abs and we do not.
Now you fight fires and Brock Lesnar.
So, when at the point that you're now, if you were to look at a retrospective, what do you think has been your biggest accomplishment throughout, your life thus far?
Well, when I was asked that question, definitely my biggest accomplishment was at the age of 32 when I accepted Jesus into my life. And I will tell anybody that was my greatest day of my life, and definitely my biggest accomplishment was having Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Yeah. What do you think when, other people that are in that same age bracket that are making decisions, especially men, that we've got so many that are isolated now. You've got the number of suicides among males, especially in that 30 to 45-year-old age bracket, is up. One of the things we were talking with a guy named Stephen Mansfield, who's a best-selling author, a few weeks ago, said that most of the notes that they're seeing now, especially over in the UK, is that like no other man knows what I'm going through. How can this be? We've got a lot of guys that are wrestling with faith, several that we've put just at the cusp. They're like, I realize that I'm a sinner in need of repentance. I realize that Christ died for my sins. I just can't hit that jumping off point to believe in the resurrected Savior. What would you tell somebody? What is it that made the difference in your life to be able to not just, have the recognition of the need for the Savior, but also then to really jump off into the belief, and what made the difference for you?
That day that I was saved, personally, I felt something inside the day that I heard that, the pastor speak. And when he said, those of you that haven't invited Christ into your life, I mean, I felt something inside that day that I'd never felt before. And I knew that I needed what Christ had to offer. And I'd never felt that before. And, I couldn't even fight back the emotions that I was feeling, and tears were flowing down my eyes. And I knew that day that, that I needed Christ in my life. And I immediately after that day got involved in Bible studies and started going and got surrounded myself with other people that, could hold me accountable. And, I got plugged in. And if you try to do this all on your own, I think you're just asking for trouble. I mean, you can't do this by yourself. So once you become a Christian, you need to start taking those steps forward and have an accountability partner and having people that you can call on when you're going through those tough times, and try not to battle those battles by yourself. Have somebody that you can get on the phone with and call and talk to through those tough times, and accountability partners that you can count on, that will pick up their phone when you're struggling and having tough times like that can walk you through those battles, because we all have them. Even now that, I've been a Christian for 20 years, I still go through tough times. We all do. And it's great to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey buddy, let's go have a cup of coffee. I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. We're discovering that more and more, and not just the sense that it's something that's necessary, but we have to work to build that, because it's, as we become more detached or more career oriented or things like that, it's easier and easier for us to isolate from everybody else versus engage. And I think the pandemic has done a wonderfully awesome / terrible job of pointing out in all of us the disengagement and the need for community. Yeah. I do have a couple of questions about the way that you wrote the book. The book is a series of stories, and I'm curious because some of them seem like they're in chronological order, and others it seems like you start a story after you've given a couple of chapters of background that hops into another area. Have you thought about because everything in here is interesting, and I always feel like whenever I say feel like, as I've finished each chapter, I wanted more detail. Have you thought about doing like the memoir of the where we start with, the NCAA, the collegiate career and some childhood stuff, into where you are now, giving some of the full details of it? Because there are some details about, what happened with the WWE and, that up and down struggle that you had, where things were at with Team Impact. But also you're very transparent in this book about your divorce and some of the things that happened there, and meeting your new wife, and who Daisy's amazing. I've gotten to see you two grow together, and a lot of the stuff on your social media pages, and it was one of the things that encouraged me getting married at 34, that like there is still the potential for good, healthy relationship, even though I spent all of these years as a single guy in pursuit of completely different things than what I was looking at then.
In your old age?
Yeah, and my wife say it's in my advanced age, as my wife told me. So
you've got a couple good years ahead of you still.
Yeah, maybe one or two left. So, but have you thought about that? And the follow-up question to that is, what would you tell men that are in that situation? And maybe this is a separate topic to get into, that they've experienced divorce, they're in that spot now, and they're looking to move on. We've had a couple of widowers on. We've got some friends that have been divorced within the past couple of years that are believers, and they're trying to figure out what life looks like now post that, and what advice might you give to those guys?
Well, at the time you just think that, things can't get any better, or things can't get better, and your life end. And it was just such a dark time going through it at the time, that you're just in such a bad place. It's just so hard. And I remember being on the road, during that time, and leaning on some of you guys that were on the road with me, and just battling some of those emotions, and then, just staying in the Word and just staying positive through those times, and just leaning on God through those times, knowing that He's going to bring the right person to you at the right time, and knowing and trusting in Him for it, and not going out and trying to search for your own happiness, but leaning on the Lord for it. And I think that's the biggest advice I could give to somebody. I think so many guys try to go out and force a relationship or force their own happiness, and they try to, like, I'm going to go find my happiness, I'm going to go out partying, I'm going to go out drinking, I'm going to find my happiness through they try to make it themselves, instead of just living day to day like they're supposed to, and serving the Lord every single day and just trusting that he's going to bring that happiness to them when it's the right time in the right place. And if you just do it the right way, God's going to make it happen, and it's going to make it happen the right way.
I think that that's a very sage for most of us. I mean, especially as a pastor, there's some instances where I feel like I'm just at a loss, because there's some things that only experience can teach us as you walk through, and it's different from me saying, no, you need to stay in the Word, you need to do this, you need to just continue to be rooted, versus to see somebody that has walked through it and on the other side, like you, who God is just completely and tremendously blessed with the family and stuff that they've got. Not just to mention everything that you've got behind you with all of the other things where you can just point to and be like, these are the things that happened because I was honoring the Lord. He opened up these opportunities for me, which has just been absolutely awesome. Well, Ron,
and you don't understand it. You don't understand what's happening at the time, and you don't understand a thing until you look back afterwards and you say, it's so clear afterwards when you're looking back at your life, but at the time you totally don't understand a thing. But it's not for you to understand until the end,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, man, I really appreciate the time. I know we said we were going to hold you for about a half hour, and we've gone over that just a little bit. So we want to let you get back with your family. But, Ron, thanks so much for coming on. And thanks for chatting with our audience. Make sure you go check out ronwaterman.com, where you can get the book Tapped Out by Jesus, as well as some of the H2O gear that's still out there. Where can we find you on maybe Instagram, Twitter? I saw that your last tweet is up there on your site. So what are your handles so we can find you on social media?
You can find me on Facebook at just Ron Waterman, and also on Instagram. I think I'm Ron H2O Man as well on Instagram.
Nice. And so if people are in the Colorado area and they are looking for the most intimidating realtor out there, they can also check out H2O Man Realty. There you go. Right. Well, hey, Ron, we really appreciate the time, man. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming. If you're ever in town, we can do a special episode where you punch me in the face for those terrible jokes.
I'd rather just choke you out.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
That works too.
Well, hey, man.
It would be an honor.
So I'm going to start this one the same way I always do. So Ron Waterman, huh? I've noticed.
Waterman, H2O Man.
So every time we come back from an interview, I'm realizing as we're doing the editing that I have this same stupid line where I'm like, so my such and such, huh?
Yeah. I really steamed him up.
I don't know what to say.
I'm trying to make an H2O joke.
How's it going?
It's not going really
Did
well.
you vaporize the H2O?
Yeah, there you go. Vaped him.
So,
but no, super cool guy.
Yeah, and really laid back. He rolled with the punches. Hey,
there you go.
No,
I like that you kept saying like back. You and I actually rolled. Yeah. I bet you love saying that, don't you?
It happened a couple of times. So we got to one of the coolest things about being on the road with the guys in Team Impact was we helped them train for their events. Mm-hmm. And as a road manager, because I was never an athlete on the road, let me rephrase, I've never been an athlete. So when we went to go to different cities to work on stuff, like when we were working with the guys that were the world's strongest man competitors, we got to do some of the events with them as far as like the training and stuff went.
Yeah, they had to train constantly.
Oh my God.
It was every day for a couple hours at least.
And it was one of those things where they did such a vast array
I always drove them to the gym.
Well done.
Yep, that's what I would do.
So, but they had such a vast array of areas of competition that, like, when you were on the road, it was one week in particular where I was on the road with Randall Harris, who we've interviewed before.
Randall the Bear Harris.
Yeah, world powerlifting champion. Josh Thigpen, who is a world strongman competitor.
Josh Pigpen Thigpen.
Yeah, that will get you punched. And then Ron. And so
Greg
like one day,
Evil Lewis.
Poor Greg. So
I love Greg. That is not an insult.
You're just being rude to Greg. I'm telling.
Oh, whatever.
I'm telling.
I'm making all kinds of punch appointments, aren't I?
You really are. So
go ahead.
When we would train for the week, we had a day that was all the guys would train in the gym, but we had a day specifically where we were training powerlifting stuff with Randall. And so we were training heavy on squat and deadlift one day because Randall was getting ready for a competition. Well, the next day we're trying to find a place where Josh can train. So we're learning to lift Atlas stones, and we're doing farmers walks and carrying anvils across a gym and things like that.
Just all kinds of manly things.
In order to train Josh, right. And then the last, like Wednesday, we've trained weights all this week. We would find a gym with some mats, and then a world powerlifting champion.
What did Jim and Matt do?
Not very much. They just laid there. A world powerlifting champion.
Unfortunate.
A world powerlifting champion, a world strongman competitor, a wiry little 140-pound guy.
That was you.
Would then go, and we essentially.
And I know what you're thinking. I wouldn't just lay there.
Yeah. So Ron would do this thing called Shark Tank, and it's an actual exercise in jiu-jitsu, and he would do it back home in Greeley, where essentially what would happen is he would be in the center of the mat, and all of these other guys would help him train by one at a time. You would roll with him. Either you get to the end of 5 minutes or until he taps you out, and then the next person goes in. And Ron would do this for a half hour straight without any breaks to try to train his conditioning and so that he's working with different guys. So we would Shark Tank with him, and it was totally different because none of us knew what we were doing. And so it helped him in a way that, when two jiu-jitsu practitioners are rolling with each other, it's like a chess match. Mm-hmm. Like if you grab somebody by the lapel, you know that there's a handful of things that you can do. Conversely, when you've grabbed them, they know like he is probably trying to do like A, B, or C, right? And so you're trying to get into the head of your opponent and defend yourself at the same time to try to figure out where they're going. Ron had no idea what we were going to do, and especially with the other guys because they could rely so much on their strength, which is not something, and I don't want to be misunderstood here. There are some guys in MMA that are incredibly strong, but they're not the strongest men in the world, right? They didn't just go from bench pressing 600 pounds 2 days ago to now they're in the ring with you and fighting. A guy that can bench press 400 pounds is an incredibly strong guy.
Look at Conor McGregor. Like, he's not massive.
Right. No, not at all. He's an incredible fighter, but he's not, like you're saying, he's not massive.
I would say wiry to some degree.
Yeah, but now Ron's putting himself in an arena of sorts where he's wrestling with a guy that can push 400 pounds, not on a bench press, but just take a 400-pound log and press it over his head 10 times with Josh Thigpen. That guy that literally can pick him up and throw him in a way that his competitors can't because he is one of the 5 strongest men on the planet. And so it shifted his training and forced him to do things and think in a way that he wouldn't normally because he's not fighting people in the 140-pound category, which is what I was. So he would try to like close down on me, and I still got like 4 inches of space that I can take my little noodle arm out of. And he had these other guys where
it's on Dennis the Menace. Remember that old movie?
Yeah.
Whenever he tied the
Walter Matthau.
He tied the ropes around Dennis the Menace, and he just kind of wiggled
out of him. Yeah. So it was that, and then on the other end, like if Ron was doing something and Josh or Randall didn't want him to move, they could hold him there. Mm-hmm. There wasn't anybody in his weight class that was a UFC fighter that would just be able to hold Ron still. Well, these two guys didn't. There was nothing that they were going to do. Mm-hmm. They knew that, but they also didn't want Ron to choke them, so they would just grab him.
So if they could sit on him,
you got a 360-pound guy that's like, I have decided that you're not going anywhere. Yeah. And he was like, this, and there were multiple times where Ron was like, you can't just stall, and Randall's like, yes, I can.
Hey Lukey, give me thirds.
Yeah, bring me snacks. Right.
Oh, it's a protein shake and a shake.
So that was, definitely took some pride in that. It was a lot of fun. It was the first exposure that I got to jiu-jitsu, which is now something that I've continued to do.
Shark tanking.
Yeah, but shark tanking, that's what it is.
Whenever you were like ready to stop, did you ever tell him while you were shark tanking, like, I'm out and here's why?
I'm gonna tap in. Here's why.
Yeah.
And this is why, Ron.
That's a terrible joke.
What you did really hurt in the shoulder and elbow area.
There you go.
It caused a lot of pain. I don't
and therefore I'm out.
Yeah.
Of time.
Yeah. I could
On
lick
my
my
life.
elbow, and I think I'm out.
That's not. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's not how it worked. You tapped and you were like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was.
There was no rationally explaining why you were out.
No, especially not. So if I am wearing a fresh pair of boots, I'm about 5'8", and I'm in like the 190-pound category
Genuine
right
ostrich
now.
skin.
Yeah, that's no, I can't afford that. But
Four easy payments of $9.99.
so
I
Ron
don't remember how
is
that stupid meme
6'4", and his last fight he was around 295
Yeah, he's
pounds
huge.
with a six pack at 50, right? That's not me at 35. Okay, so at my peak when I'm working with these guys, I'm maybe in like the 160, 170 pound range right before I started bodybuilding. And Ron is not only 8 inches taller than me, he outweighs me by over 100 pounds. So going in and doing this stuff, it was an absolute blast because now it's like on that list of stuff that you can tell, you know, as the guys get around. Oh yeah, well I fought a real UFC. I rolled with a real UFC fighter, and like, really? Yes, I was crushed, but you want to know what it's like for it to be stuck underneath a 300-pound man like this? That's it. I can relate to professional defensive tackles in a way that a lot of people can't. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to it.
Well, all I kept thinking of was how relieved guys must be, particularly, but it's, you know, women too, it doesn't matter, but
Sure.
when they're in a house fire and this titan headbutts the door down and walks in, it's like, oh, thank
Right.
you, you're going to save all of us.
Yeah, like we're totally fine.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that would definitely
that was
provide some security.
I'd be afraid, because I'm a big guy too, that some little guy is going to come in and explain how we're going to get out.
Excuse me, we're going to run through this wall. I know the house is on fire, but I need you to crawl with me.
Yeah,
We're
where he's just going to walk in.
Yep.
I got him.
Yeah,
Let's go get some food.
He just picks up you and Heather in each
Let's
hand.
go get all the food.
He holds Kale in his teeth and he just walks out the door with all of you. I've saved this family.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does have to provide some security. You know what I didn't
just
ask
the
him that I
biggest
thought
firefighter
would,
in the world.
that I thought would be really interesting, because I will tell you this, men, if you buy this book, you need to do. Did you ever do the book covers when you were in school?
Yeah.
You need to get the book cover for this, right? Because if
the
you just
brown
have
paper on the front, you color on it.
Yep, that's what I would do with this. I would cover this up.
So you're not emasculated?
Yeah, exactly. So that I'm not walking around the house, Saturday morning.
Because you don't have 25-inch arms?
Exactly. Right? So cover it up. You don't want that just hanging out around the house. But I didn't ask him. I do wonder if he's ever been in one of those, the firefighter calendars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think it'd be an interesting... Maybe next time.
We should have asked him.
If he's here in person.
Next time when he gets here in person and he punches me in the face, you can ask him
You know what?
that.
I think so. He said right before we started the interview that he's actually done a couple of things with Team Impact recently, and they're talking about doing some stuff here in Dallas within the next couple of months if the COVID restrictions get lifted. I wonder if we couldn't get him in person and see if we can roll him over to our jiu-jitsu gym and see if...
and then you can roll again.
No, we can film you rolling with him.
Oh.
So I think that would be a great segment
in
for the show. Danley and Ron.
And with you where he was nice, he was like, this is what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little more intense than
We'll
that.
put a helmet on you.
Yeah, I'm going to need a lot of things.
You're going to just go ahead and make your rider out right now of the things that you're going to need.
I'm going to bubble wrap everything. First off, that would make a good video, too.
It would. It'd be
Me
funny.
going against a UFC super heavyweight, which now I don't know if he'd be in that same category. He's probably heavyweight.
Well, I don't know. We didn't ask him.
Yeah.
But he did give away his age. He's
I tend
52.
not to ask people their weight.
Yeah, how come?
Because it's rude.
Speaking
if you're
of-
not an athlete, it's rude, which is always funny.
Speaking
I mentioned.
of, I'm going to turn this way. Danley, how are you doing on your abs by Christmas?
I'm doing great.
Are you?
No. I would not say that I've gone back up. I've maintained some. I lost. I ended up losing, I don't know, like 20 pounds or something.
Okay.
that's kind of where I'm still at. I've
So-
been there for a month.
Here's the loophole that I want us to look
Good.
at.
Oh, thank goodness.
Did we say by Christmas this year or just by Christmas?
We did not.
Yeah,
we did
so-
not say Christmas 2020.
2023 abs by Christmas. Now, I think it might be a realistic goal for both of us to reach next year,
Yeah.
but I don't know that it's happening because we're getting ready to, and by the time this airs, we'll have done it.
I think
we're going to visit. I have not met a lot of my wife's family.
Oh yeah.
And
You
so
want to
we're
go be
going-
like, I can't eat this, mama.
Yeah.
I can't eat your pudding.
Mimi is making
Mimi.
Mimi is making some of her
I was not
specialty
that
desserts.
far off.
Yeah, you're not. Mimi's making some of her specialty desserts, and I don't want to be like, well,
Do you have Splenda or something else stupid? Do you have a stevia version?
do you have Splenda or something else stupid? Yeah. I
No,
just tell
it's
everybody
gonna have tons
no,
of
I got
sugar and white
I can't
flour.
do this. I got the sugars.
Yeah, there you go.
But I don't want to be that guy. That's like, no, I can't. I'm
So
trying to have abs for your granddaughter. Like, what the heck? I'm going to hang out with a guy who is a World War II veteran. He does
he's
not
not fixing to hear that.
Yeah, no, he doesn't have time for me to tell him I'm trying to get abs. Yeah, that's not what he was thinking
and
about
your
when he was my
solution to
age.
getting abs is meeting Mimi and not eating her pie.
My solution to getting abs is insulting your daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Mimi is his daughter. Butch is he's the great granddad.
Oh dang.
Yeah. Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm excited. I met him.
for me, I'll say, and I think this is pretty well documented, that
Yeah.
it was always a joke with getting
Sure.
abs.
Right.
I wanted to lose weight, and so did you.
Yeah.
We both have done that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm still above where I was when we started.
Yeah, well, you got a lot of muscle tacked on.
I think I'm working that back end.
All of my clothes are still very loose. It's pretty nice.
Have
Oh,
you, and you were able to fit
So-
back into your skinny jeans, right?
Yep. Yep, I was.
Is that a great way to
Before
put
I
it?
broke them.
Yeah. No way.
No. I
Okay,
haven't,
good.
I haven't.
That would be sad / hilarious.
No, but my sweats are falling off.
Our pet sweats are falling.
I know. I thought that too.
So, so be praying for me as I go down there because I met Butch, who is the granddad. I met Butch.
Oh, man.
Or the great, he's the great
Oh,
granddad
man.
and World War II
You are
veteran.
screwed.
So I met them. They had like a Memorial Day thing in 2019.
What does he drink, like iron for breakfast?
He's got to. So literally, we go to this. They've got this their family has this little lake house, and so we go to the lake house, and everybody's hanging out. And Nanny, who is the great grandmother, who loves me because I'm a pastor, which I'm sort of the ire of all of the men in the family who have married in, and they're like, she only likes you because you're a preacher. And I'm like, fine. Any of you
take
guys
it.
could have been preachers if you would have committed your life to Jesus and tried to do good things with it, but whatever. Just nonchalantly throw that out there. I'm sure that's going to give me some hate. But anyway, so Nanny's talking to me. She's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And we're getting along great. And she goes, you need to go outside and say hi to Butch. And I'm like, what? Go say hi to Butch. And she
Is that
points,
the dog?
Yeah, like who is Butch? And she points to the dock. And out on the dock, there is a man in a jacket with a black hat that says World War II veteran on it, who's just sitting on the dock alone. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go out and
that is
and
a man
see
right
Butch.
there.
And so he sits out on the dock. He casts 3 fishing poles into the water and is just sitting out there hanging out. And everyone in the family, it was like a scene from The Godfather. Like, make sure you go out to the dock and you say hi to Butch.
respects.
Yep. And so they did. Like
Butch doesn't
one
come
at a
in and
time.
pay respect.
No,
You go out and pay respect to Butch.
that's it. You go say hi to him.
Yep.
Because he is the reason that you're all here.
Pay tribute.
Yeah. And he's not demanding that anybody come out there. It's a total like respect thing. But it was so awesome. So I went out there and I, shook hands with him and I'm like, hi, I'm Lucas. He's like, oh, you're Kirsten, sweetie. It's like, I am. And he looks at me and he goes,
You're old.
yeah, pretty much. How did my great granddaughter end up with some elderly man? He looks at
I
me.
love this running joke now.
So he looks at me and he goes, "Did you lose your razor?" And I was like,
No, sir. I want to be like Thor, the god of thunder
at the time, my
from
beard was-
Asgard, which is not a real place. Or Niflheim.
What did you say to me? No. So he asked me if I lost my razor. I'm like, no, I grew this out because I would look really young without it, and I'm a pastor and this and that. And he goes, you're not one of those. That was it. You're not one of those. And then he just looked and like the pole starts to bend. So he's like, got a bite. And he looks at me and goes, bring me the pole. Okay. Right. I don't know what I could have been. I'm not one of those is the best I've got. So I'm hoping
That's awesome.
to get an answer.
I need an update
during this trip as to what I'm not. And then my darling wife came out and she was like, "Hey, Granddaddy, hey, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Oh, it's so good to see you." And like gets up to say hi to her as he should.
Yeah.
Right. But he's happy to see her, gives her a hug, sits back down. And
Greatest generation.
yeah.
Man.
And he's like doting on her. Meanwhile, I come back over and he's like, "So is this your sweetie?" She's like, "Yeah, this is Lucas," blah, blah, blah. And he looks at her and he goes, "Did he lose his razor?" So, yep.
Remember Ron Swanson said that to somebody. Is the razor in your house broken, son? Butch sounds very Butch.
Yeah. Yeah,
It sounds like a perfect name.
most definitely. And he is, by all accounts, a great and really friendly guy, and that we're supposed to keep our eye on him because he cheats at dominoes.
Awesome.
Like, everybody has told me going into this, they're like,
He cheats.
all right, when you go down there and you're at Butch and Nanny's house, or Papa and Nanny's house is what they call it. When you're at Papa and Nanny's house, you gotta watch out for Papa because he cheats at dominoes. Like, what? Like, yeah, like bad. Like he cheats bad and will like
That's
slip things in,
fantastic.
and people won't realize it for like 5 turns that he put a domino down that shouldn't be there. They're like, there will be a 6 and he'll put down 2 3s. And he's like, well, they equal 6. And then just put it down. And people will start playing off of it because they just assume that he did the right thing. Like, no. But he'll ruin...
Does he ever play it off like, oh, I didn't know? Or
Well, if he gets caught, apparently he like jokes about it. But if you don't notice it, then he just won't say anything. And you'll get through like half a game with a bad whole area of dominoes that he ruined.
I like this.
Yeah, he seems...
I like this guy.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get to go and to hang out with him and see if I can answer the question of, I'm not one of those whats.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that, sir?
Yeah, you mind
Please.
You mind finishing a sentence you started a year and a half ago? So,
man.
yeah.
Well,
hey, Danley, thanks for being on my show and playing guitar for me in my band.
I hate you. What was another episode?
Yeah, it was. Thanks to Ron Waterman. Make sure to go check him out at ronwaterman.com. The book is Tapped Out by Jesus, From the Cage to the Cross. He's got some gear on the H2O Man site or on ronwaterman.com, some H2O Man gear that made by Chincheck and some of the other companies that still sponsor and endorse him as an athlete. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the Rev and the Rep wherever you get your podcast, but also right down here.
Yeah. And if you're my friend, I expect you to go comment too.
Yeah, you could comment.
Any friends of mine or no friends of mine if you're not commenting.
Have you seen the comments? So we've been doing Facebook premieres, and I know we've been ending the show, but we'll pause the ending for a minute, and then we'll just pick it right back up. Have you noticed, and I don't know if anybody out there
Who
is
were you
doing
talking
YouTube
to
videos.
just then?
The audience.
Oh, okay.
So if you have created a Facebook premiere, the first comments are always bad websites.
Yes, I have noticed that.
We are having to
we've
monitor
had a bunch
it,
of them that we got to go
we've
delete.
had to delete like immediately. So we need other people to comment so that those things get buried. So make sure that you comment if you really like us. And if you really don't like us, just make sure you comment and tag Danley.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Yeah, if you're my friend, go
think that's
comment
a
on
show.
my stupid show, you wieners. Is that safe? Is that a safe word?
that we've got. Well, Danley had some alternate titles that he was wondering that if these were some things that you had considered for your book title. Your book, Tapped Out by Jesus, From the Cage to the Cross, is available on Amazon and on your website. You can actually get an autographed copy on your website. And Danley had made a list of alternate book titles, and he was asking me about this in the pre-show, and I was like, I think you should pitch them to Ron for the sequel. So go ahead. You had a couple of things you wanted to share with Ron.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Yes, you sir. I've got a list in front of me.
Okay. Well, Wrestling with Faith is one.
Where you can now
he's gonna punch me. He's gonna find me and punch me.
Well, now that he's got that one, the sequel, Wrestling with Faith, can then be a little bit more in depth.
Jesus said to forgive others. Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't put them in a key lock.
That would be a good thing.
Punched in the spirit was the other one.
I think that those could work as alternative titles.
Yeah,